Hi, my name is Natalie Siraj, and today I will be talking about the poem Having a Coke with You by Frank O'Hara. So, Frank O'Hara was a poet of the New York School, and he was known for his conversational stream of consciousness style writing. He often wrote about love and art and the joy of everyday life. His poetry, along with the other poets of the New York School, was characterized by spontaneity, immediacy, and humor a lot of the times. They are often associated with the beat poets, but the style's a little bit different. The beats are a little bit more political and a little more avant-garde, I would say. So Frank was an art curator at the MoMA, which is the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and he wrote as a daily practice pretty much every day on his lunch breaks as he walked around the streets of New York. And this poem that I'm going to read is an example of his ability to make small moments feel grand instead of the traditional formalist approach where poetry is very serious and love poetry is very serious. O'Hara focuses on something as simple as having a Coke with someone and makes it feel profound. And here's the poem. Having a Coke with you is even more fun than going to San Sebastian, Irun, Undai, Biarritz, Bayonne, or being sick to my stomach on the Travessera de Grazia in Barcelona. Partly because in your orange shirt you look like a better, happier Saint Sebastian. Partly because of my love for you. Partly because of your love for yogurt. Partly because of the fluorescent orange tulips around the birches. Partly because of the secrecy our smiles take on before people and statuary. It is hard to believe when I am with you that there can be anything as still, as solemn, as unpleasantly definitive as statuary, when right in front of it in the warm New York 4 o'clock light we are drifting back and forth, between each other like a tree breathing through its spectacles. And the portrait show seems to have no faces in it at all, just paint. You suddenly wonder why in the world anyone ever did them. I look at you, and I would rather look at you than all the portraits in the world. Except possibly for the Polish writer occasionally, and anyway, it's in the Frick, which thank heavens you haven't gone to yet, so we can go together for the first time. And the fact that you move so beautifully more or less takes care of futurism. Just as at home I never think of the nude descending a staircase, or at rehearsal, a single drawing of Leonardo or Michelangelo that used to wow me. And what good does all the research of the Impressionists do them, when they never got the right person to stand near the tree when the sun sank? Or for that matter, Marino Marini, when he didn't pick the rider as carefully as the horse. It seems they all were cheated of some marvelous experience, which is not going to go wasted on me, which is why I'm telling you about it. So, to get into some thoughts and analysis of the poem, I will talk about the poetic techniques first. So, this poem is written in conversational free verse. That's kind of the genre that it falls under, which essentially means there's no structure, no meter, no rigidity, and the only rhythm in the piece, really the only pattern, is that it follows natural speech, even though it doesn't have a lot of punctuation, and you kind of have to insert your own pauses. So an example of that would be the enjambment of the line, I look, line break, at you, and I would rather look at you than all the portraits in the world. And that creates movement, and it mirrors the way that people speak. Also, this poem is stream of consciousness, so it asks the reader to experience the emotion being written about rather than just understanding or empathizing with it. I think this is sort of in contrast to the formalist or older styles of poetry that were popular before the new generation of beats and New York School and everybody in Frank O'Hara's peer group, basically what they were going against, which is this idea of poetry as being very grand and more solemn, and all the lines are very crafted, but the stream of consciousness allows you to go into his mind and experience what he was experiencing when those emotions came up. And I think that allows them to sort of bubble up in the reader a little bit more naturally, which is a cool experience and something that I think poetry is unique in being able to do. Juxtaposition of high art and everyday life. In this poem in particular, those names I was saying before, those are pieces of art. And Frank was an art curator, as we know. So he spent a lot of his day looking at these high art pieces. And in this poem, he is comparing simple acts like having a Coke with his lover as comparable, if not better and more profound than pieces of high art. So I thought that was cool. As far as personal significance goes, I used to really dislike Frank, and I thought it was very arrogant that he felt that he could just publish these poems that seemed to have no deeper thought put behind them besides just that they came from his brain onto the paper and to the publisher. But I think the more time I spent understanding his story and understanding like the story of how these lunchtime poems came about, I started to think about what poetry is differently. And it inspired my own writing because it inspired me to be more earnest and to see that there was value in things that weren't highly crafted and highly edited, even. So I was able to kind of shift to be a more vulnerable and I think better version of myself as a writer after being introduced to the style. And then lastly, along that same line, is that when you take away this idea that poetry is grand and that you need to have some sort of high IQ to be able to write it, and you start to elevate everyday experiences as poetic, it makes poetry more accessible, which is something that I am very passionate about. And I don't know if Frank was necessarily very passionate about it, but his work allowed poetry to be accessed by so many more people. I think that that is an important quality in this piece and in his work in particular. And then last but not least, I just wanted to show the man who inspired this poem and many others, who is a ballet dancer named Vincent Warren, who is Frank's longtime partner before his untimely death in 1966. Frank's untimely death. But thank you so much for listening.